name is Jama. I imagine most people would describe me as a short lady with a loud mouth and the really big hair, which is entirely true. But for many years, if you'd asked me to tell you a little about myself, some of the first descriptions would have been where I was employed, what my job title was, and a condensed version of my responsibilities. I made a good living, I loved my job, I really liked my boss and enjoyed the people I worked with and the perks of what I did. But several years ago, God began to reveal to me that I was needed at home by my husband and my children, far more than I was needed by anyone in the corporate world. The harder God nudged me, the more I resisted, and the more I attempted to convince both Him and myself that I wasn't really stay-at-home mom material, that financially we couldn't make it work, and it just wasn't the right decision for our family. During that time of resistance, my anxiety heightened and my fears of being inadequate became all-consuming. When I was at home, my mind was preoccupied by work tasks, and when I was at work, I was plagued by guilt, knowing that my husband and my girls were only getting the leftovers of my time and my energy. Now, I'm beyond blessed with a mother who happily watched my girls while I worked and helped to taxi them to appointments and extracurricular activities, but God just wouldn't let me forget that those were actually my responsibilities and no one else's. And I was under so much conviction, I was miserable, and I knew what He was calling me to do, but I was terrified. But God's pursuing was relentless, and every devotion, article, or scripture I read, every song or sermon I heard seemed to be about having faith and trusting God. And I believed that God could supply our every need. I believed that with all my heart. But I couldn't imagine actually stepping off that ledge and putting my faith into action. I can take you back to the exact spot where in my van, which we lovingly refer to as Minnie Pearl, was parked when I finally conceded to God out loud through snot and tears that I heard Him and I knew what He was telling me to do. I also distinctly remember admitting to Him that if quitting my job to be a stay-at-home mom was in fact what He wanted me to do, that He had to make it undeniable and absolutely impossible for me to make a case to continue to work because I wasn't brave enough or strong enough to take that step on my own. That was the fall of 2016, and in late January 2017, my grandmother fell and suffered a broken hip, which meant that my mother had to become her full-time caregiver, and I had to look for other options for childcare. I've made jokes that when God talks about me, He probably shakes His head and says, "Bless her heart." And He had made that decision unavoidable for me, but it still took me 4 months before I submitted to the Lord's will and decided to come home and be a stay-at-home wife and mom. We've had to adjust our way of living, and financially we can't do all the things on a whim that we used to do, but the benefits far outweigh the sacrifices, and it was the best decision that I could have ever made for our family. God continues to supply for all of our needs and the biggest majority of our wants. The only regret that I will ever have about this situation is not obeying the Lord and stepping out on faith and taking that risk so much sooner than I did. I resisted God for so long and was so focused on what I might have to give up that I couldn't catch a glimpse of the more fulfilling life that He desired to give us. I almost allowed fear to rob my family of the blessings that God intended for us. But I have never been so sure that fear is a liar.